Chris, welcome to the Tech Recruitment Podcast. I'm super excited to welcome you here today because you are not just the AWS Hero, but you are also the VMware expert, right? And I've been involved in recruiting of some Linux admin in the past, and I recall VMware as a company or the technology they are developing. But like many recruiters, I don't really know what does that mean. So
Hmm.
a lot of people in our community may also be a bit lost. So why don't you tell us what does this really mean? Like, is this technology still up to date? Do people use it these days? What is VMware actually for?
Sure. First, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you. VMware is a technology that I want to say about 20 years ago. There were just physical servers out there. If you wanted to spin up an application, or if your team wanted to create an application, you would have to go procure new hardware. Every new piece of hardware was a new application. Then VMware came along, and what that did was that you could take one piece of hardware and chop it up into a bunch of different virtual little machines inside that piece of hardware. Now, nowadays, that sounds obvious, and that sounds like, of course, well, everybody does that, right? But back then, it was very, transformative and technologically life changing. And even to this day, folks are leveraging VMware in larger companies where it's cheaper actually to have a large data center and use your own hardware than it is to move everything up to the cloud. So it's still being used very, very widely in the larger environments. I would argue that, for smaller companies, for like the SMB areas, folks that are creating a company today, most of the time they're going to be born in the cloud. They're going to be cloud native, as we call it. And so they wouldn't recognize what VMware is nowadays. But if you are an engineer or an architect or something that's been working in the SMB space, and then you would then move into enterprise, you're going to run into some hardware. You're going to run, if your company has their own data centers, then invariably they will be running VMware internally.
Mm. So is it safe to say that companies that are being started now these days with one or two people in the engineering teams, they usually use cloud by default because it's easier, cheaper. But the corporations out there, they still use the mainframes and the older technology, including VMware.
Yeah, and to be clear, mainframes and VMware are two different things. You're not going to have a virtualized mainframe like the really old AS400s and stuff like that. Those, by and large, are not virtualized.
Mhm.
So there is a distinction between mainframes, VMware, physical x86 hardware, and then like cloud instances. And then there's serverless, and then there's all those other things too.
Mhm.
There's a bunch of different ways to select. Okay, so I call it the four food groups. There's RAM, there's CPU, there's disk, and there's networking. And those four food groups are how you build everything, from a smartphone to a laptop to a giant server to a supercomputer. Everything needs those four food groups.
Mhm.
And how you divide up those four food groups is what you eventually make.
Mm.
So it's a lot of it is still the same stuff. It's just abstracted. You've got different layers of logical abstraction away from the hardware. At the base of it, it's all still the same hardware. It's all still the same four food groups. You just are digesting it differently. You're using it differently.
Mhm. So is it similar to this concept of infrastructure as a cloud or platform as a cloud or software as a service where,
So
yeah.
yeah, so infrastructure as code
Oh.
is a term used. Actually, the company that I work for, HashiCorp, is the creates a tool called Terraform, and Terraform is one of the big infrastructure as code tools out there. And what infrastructure as code means is that instead of back in the old days, buying a piece of hardware, putting it into a data center, racking and stacking it, provisioning it, installing the software on it, and then giving it to your developer, the people in the data center, as it were, the folks that are provisioning the infrastructure, they now use code. So we're not buying hardware, we're using a line of code in Terraform to create an EC2 instance in AWS or Azure or GCP or one of the thousands of providers that Terraform has. So infrastructure as code is how we today provision the hardware that back in the day we needed to actually like physically manually do.
Mhm.
And that includes also VMware and all of those things. You can use Terraform, or you can use infrastructure as code, specifically in my case, Terraform, to provision virtual machines in VMware, EC2 instances in AWS, or any of the services basically. So infrastructure as code is different from virtualization writ large, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of because there is also on one end there is this evolution from the mainframe through virtualization to the cloud, but on the
Mhm,
other
mhm.
side you also have the separation of small companies and large companies where in a
Right,
small company they kind of skipped all of those stages because it's a new company, right? So
right,
they
right.
don't really need mainframes or they jump straight to the latest and greatest. So what is now the latest and greatest? If there is a recruiter who is looking for a cloud engineer to join a startup, like what are the skills that they should possess these days? Of course, something like mainframe would not be relevant, right,
Right, right.
for the startup. But what would be? What are the cool things these days?
So, well, I guess it depends on if you're into AI or not. If you're okay, there's a couple of different areas that we want to tackle here. We've got the operational side of things, the deploying of the services, and then we've got the developer side of things, the layering of applications onto those services. And then we've got that little magical intersection that everybody calls DevOps, which is not a tool but a culture, blah blah blah. Which one do you want to tackle first?
Well, the development.
Okay, so from the development standpoint, um, the fundamentals of the frameworks. So when I look at a resume, well, okay, I have actually helped recruiters translate what companies. So companies will come to recruiters and they'll say, "I want all of these skill sets,"
Mhm.
and I have a friend that runs a local recruiting company, and I come in and I help them like translate what all of that means. Um, by and large, you're going to see a wall of like must know, must have 7 years of this, must have 5 years
Yeah.
of a language that has only been around for 2 years.
Mm. Yeah.
It can be a little bit frustrating because the folks that are posting these requirements don't kind of actually understand the fundamentals of what's behind it. So what I do is I take a look at all of the requirements, must know Java, must know Python, or whatever like that, and I try to coalesce it into what is it that the company is trying to do. What are the business drivers behind the company that is actually making the widget? Like if you are an application company and all of your applications are written in Go, then it makes sense to hire somebody that is very strong in Go immediately. But if you just need a smart person that can figure things out as they go, then it's good to ask the company exactly that. So when I've been hiring in the past, when I was an enterprise architect working for like WWT, I would be farmed out to Fortune 100s to help fix projects that were going sideways. And so I would look for a team to help me fix problem X. When I'm doing that, I don't always go for, okay, I just need somebody that knows VMware. Or I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But more often than not, I try to hire a smart person that can help that can figure things out and that can ask good big questions, than carving up any specific tool set.
Mm.
No, that's from the development side. I'm much stronger on the operational side. So I can actually speak to like, if you are a DevOps person, these are the fundamental things that you must
Mm.
know. I mean, Linux is obvious. Do we want to pivot to DevOps, or do we
Yeah,
want to talk
that would
about
be
more?
awesome. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so from the DevOps perspective, you have to have a fundamental understanding of networking, a fundamental understanding of operating systems, how they interact with the network, and how roles-based access controls function. So having one good operating system under your belt, whether that's Microsoft or Linux or something like that, is essential. You have to understand how things communicate within a data center or within a cloud. You also have to have a infrastructure as code language under your belt. If you are exclusively AWS, then you could learn CloudFormation. If you are exclusively Azure, then you could learn I think it's ARM or maybe Bicep. I forget the name of it for Azure. I'm an AWS here. I don't
Mhm.
my job isn't to memorize Azure stuff. Or you can learn something like Terraform, which is applicable to all of the different clouds,
Mhm.
which is why I came to work for them because it's an awesome tool. So you need a good infrastructure as code tool to uh, leverage. Need to have a solid understanding of Git and GitHub so that you can understand versioning control, and you need a solid um, uh, what's the word for it? I'm thinking of like Ansible and Puppet and Chef, all of those different tools
Automation.
well, it is automation, but it's specifically for layering applications onto systems.
Mhm.
So there's different slices of the building up process. First, you have to build the network, then you have to build the boxes, then you have to put the software on the boxes, then you hand that off to the developers for them to do their applications. So the fundamentals of understanding how that happens and tools to enable that to happen, whether that be Terraform or CloudFormation or Chef or Puppet or Ansible or whatever, is essential. Because if you don't know how the OSI layer works, then you're not going to be able to troubleshoot a networking problem.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting with regards to this network. You mentioned the DevOps engineer should have the understanding of networking, for example. But how
Absolutely.
can a recruiter verify this knowledge? You don't ask someone on the interview, "Do you understand networking?" Because obviously the answer would be, "Of course I do." But what should be a more eloquent, more advanced question the recruiter could ask to verify the knowledge?
An eloquent question to understand the so the question that I do when I'm trying to figure out exactly how much a person knows about a certain thing, I have one go-to question. I say, I'm on a laptop and I open up a web browser and I type in www.google.com. I hit enter and I want you, dear interviewee, to explain to me in as eye-wateringly detailed as possible exactly what happens between the
Mm.
time that you hit enter and the time that the page, the main page for Google comes up.
Hmm.
And I said, I want you to get into all the things. And so if they get into, I mean, I've had hardware experts get into like bus transfer rates and like hard drive to disk to bus
Hmm.
to the networking card to the router to the switch, excuse me, to the switch to the router, and then out to DNS, and then primary DNS to secondary DNS, and then finally to the server, then the server then go all the way down inside of the server back to the database, and then back from the database back to the web page.
Mhm.
That right there tells me everything that I need to know about where they're strong and where they're weak.
Hmm. Oh, that's a good one. A very good one. Wow. Wow. That's I'm just trying to imagine everything that is inside and like still sometimes it's stunning to imagine like how still can the websites load so fast because there are so many different touch points
Oh
and it
yeah,
needs to
yeah,
connect to the front and the back end and whatever. Yet still if you hit this enter button, it just appears almost instantly. So
right.
it's just crazy to imagine
And
what.
if you're an application person, you come at it from an entirely different from an entirely different perspective.
Mhm.
They might not understand DNS, but they understand, getting your 400 response back from the server,
Hmm.
and then painting the web page in Java in HTML and CSS and Java, and all of that stuff. So, based upon the profession, that one question tells me everything that I know about how good they are at their thing.
Nice, nice. And if we stick with hiring, what are some of the good communities or groups where the best cloud engineers or AWS engineers hang out?
Well, I would argue so because I run an AWS meetup, a user group, then I would
Mhm.
have to say it's the AWS user groups. That's where the best people are.
Nice.
No, so as an AWS hero, I run a user group in my area, and I see a lot of really good people as a result of that. I get some fantastic speakers. I get a lot of people in the audience asking really good questions. Um, if somebody is if I were a recruiter and I were looking for good talent in the area, I would go to all of the meetups for that particular talent. So we have local Python game development user groups. We have my AWS Portsmouth user group. There's a number of meetups out there where people are just getting together and having fun, and these are the people that are passionate about the thing that they love, because obviously they started a group and they attend a group. So that if I'm looking for talent, especially like in a local area or something like that, then that's what I go to. There's also meetups online that are completely remote. Um, so during the pandemic, the Portsmouth user group became global because everybody was sitting at home. So I now have folks from India and Russia and China that come to the show, not the show, the meetup, to talk about AWS stuff.
Mhm.
So it's a great place to, and we do actually have a jobs board. So like if folks are looking or if folks are hiring, they can, in our Slack channel, they can talk about it on the jobs board.
It's very interesting, actually. Now, when you kind of started with this sentence, if I were a recruiter, if I would kind of like to hire someone, so what if
Uh-huh.
we extrapolate this a bit further and we kind of play this game? Like, what if you wake up tomorrow and you become a recruiter? Like, what would you do? Like, really, someone with your experience, with your
Mm,
kind of insights about the um, cloud engineering and the
mhm,
whole
mhm.
the whole area. Like, what would you do if you became a technical recruiter?
Okay, so I personally am very privileged in that I've been doing community for almost 10 years, 15 years. So I have a very large network of folks in the business. I would just call I would immediately call them and say,
Mhm,
"Hey, I'm a recruiter now, and I need to place people, and you know the people that I know, and you know that I can get you good quality folks because of the work that I've done."
mm,
So I mean, I think that's kind of unfair for me.
mhm.
I would definitely have a leg up if I turned into a recruiter tomorrow.
Well, it would be definitely easier thanks to the community, but in any ways, it just
Mm,
shows how important the relationships are. And a lot of recruiters out there, they kind of wonder what's the future of recruiting now with all the AI tools, and also the book that you showed a while ago. It included something related to AI, right? So it's
right,
kind
right.
of getting everywhere. So probably these relationships are going to be very important in the long run, which
I actually was just at my friend's recruiting house the other day to talk to them about generative AI, how to leverage it to their advantage, how to read a resume that it's a new tool, it's a new skill set that everybody's starting to put into their resumes now.
Mhm,
So how to sort the truth from the BS, because, and I mean, if somebody uses Chat GPT to create their menu for their dinner, you can't put that in your resume and say, "Oh, I leveraged generative AI using the
mm,
Claude model at my last office." You were making breakfast. That's a
mhm.
lie. So it's definitely a very interesting time right now, trying to, and I was just having this conversation the other night. The IT world has this ebb and flow, this constant sine wave of technology. Something comes out and it's going to be the silver bullet that cures everything. And then the hype and the hysteria wane and it goes back down. And then something else comes out and it's going to cure everything. And we're right now in the hype cycle for generative AI. I do think it's an amazing technology, and I think that it's going to be very useful in very specific cases. But right now, we're humans, so humans do this. We're trying to use it to cure everything, and
Mm,
it's not going to fix everything. It's going to fix some things, and other things it's not going to fix. So everybody's trying to sort through that right now.
yeah, yeah. And on this note, what are some really interesting examples or cases that you are working on with regards to AI, whether it is some hobby project or a professional project?
So my company is actually using generative AI to help folks write. Uh, so the tool that we have, Terraform, when you're trying to build something, it creates an HCL, a .tf file, and the TF file then builds your thing.
Mm,
So we're using generative AI to help people make boilerplate TF files to
mm,
start creating, get a good head start on the thing that they're trying to build so that they can then just put in the variables and the specifics for what they're trying to do.
mm,
And starting to ask like good pointed questions in the website. So right now we're beta testing a new AI chatbot within the website to help get them to help get developers to their answer faster for our tooling selections.
mm.
So yeah.
That's kind of interesting. And then the question kind of is, what is the future of cloud engineering at the end? Because Amazon is developing some AI tools to make it easier for cloud engineers to deploy to the cloud. There
Mhm,
are
mhm.
all these new generative AI tools, like you just mentioned one. So will people still need to learn how to write infrastructure as code at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Until AI can write exactly, until I can just using natural language tell AI exactly what I want and it gets it perfectly. So I'll use the example of Copilot from GitHub. Copilot from GitHub is great as a pair programmer. Like if you're just trying to like get it to summarize something or write a couple of tests for a function that you've created or something like that, then it's great. It is horrible when you are trying to learn something new and you don't want it to auto populate things. There's very good cases for it and there's very bad cases for it. Um, One of the bad cases for it is helping a very beginner programmer in ways to allow the programmer to continue to learn without just auto filling things in. It's basically like giving a kid that hasn't learned how to add a calculator and then he just
Mm,
cheats and uses the calculator. You've got to get the fundamentals down first.
yeah.
Um, if they don't, then the AI is not going to help them at all because the AI still writes mistakes. It still does this thing called hallucinations. It'll
Mm,
still hallucinate an answer. It looks good, but it's completely wrong. And unless you are advanced enough to understand why it's wrong, you're just going to put that into production and blow up everything. So you can't get away from learning how to code, and we're not going to stop making developers. That's not going to happen anytime soon.
mm. It's interesting that you mention it because with Stack Overflow, there was this behavior of some developers just copying and pasting the
Right.
code from Stack
Right.
Overflow to
Yeah.
wherever, right? And now with the Gen AI, it's much easier to get code generated and then copy and paste somewhere.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
at the end, it comes down to people's ability to, or the self-discipline at the end, right? Because if they don't have the
Yeah.
discipline to learn, then they will always just default to copying and pasting. And then would you expect that there will be just a few very senior people and then a majority of people who will be kind of very mediocre? Like where do you see
Well,
actually
that's
this?
kind of where we're at today anyway. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally joking. Uh, am I? No, well, anyway. It's funny that you mentioned Stack Overflow because right when generative AI came out and started answering questions from having the code base, traffic to Stack Overflow dropped like
Mm,
precipitously. Like people just stopped going to Stack Overflow.
yeah.
They just went to Copilot or Code Whisperer or whatever and just
Mm,
started copy. I mean, they were going to copy and paste anyway.
yeah.
So now they're copying pasting from a Gen AI bot instead of from some guy or some person on Stack Overflow. So they're going to make their life harder regardless. Uh, so whether or not you are doing yourself a disservice by copying pasting from Stack Overflow or copying pasting from a Gen AI person bot,
Yeah.
you're still shooting yourself in the foot. Um, I would argue that some of the toxicity that I've seen on Stack Overflow from folks, yelling at new people trying to get into the space and everything, actually makes it easier to chat with a generative AI bot because there's not that I call it tech bro culture where they're like, "Oh, you're asking the question wrong. You should ask it this way," and you're like, "Dude, it's my first day. Shut up."
Mhm, mhm.
So
Yeah. No judgment. AI is not judging anyone. It's just answering the questions.
right, right. And it's answering it using the corpus of data from Stack Overflow. So
Mhm.
like it took all of the public repositories from GitHub. It took all of the answers from Stack Overflow. It munged it in the corpus of data, and now it's spitting out the exact same answers with 100% less toxicity. So
Yes.
I would use a Gen AI bot too if I were just now getting into it.
Yeah, yeah, and there are so many new copilots from Microsoft and GitHub and all the other ones.
There's so many. And everybody's trying to be the best or prove that they're the best with tables and charts. See, we answered it 1.4% more accurate.
Well, at least they can measure it somehow.
Well, things are changing so rapidly. I mean,
Mm,
it's all a battle of inches right now. Everybody's trying to maintain feature parity with everybody else, depending upon what feature sets you're looking for in an LLM. So there is a lot of Sturm und Drang right now with AI, and we're gonna have to get through it.
mm, cool, cool. So, and still coming back to hiring and recruiting, there are these, let's say, two groups of engineers. One, someone like you who has all the certifications from bigger and smaller companies, and
Mm.
then there are others who are just kind of copying code from Stack Overflow or Copilots. Like, how can a recruiter or even a hiring manager recognize who is the good one, who is the one learning and growing, and who knows the latest and greatest best practices versus the one who is just copying and pasting?
Um, when I'm looking at somebody's resume, I try to see if you don't have to love the business. Some people get into coding and tech because it pays really really well, and that's fine. There's no judgment for that. I
Mm,
I tend to lean towards people that really love it too, because and I can tell that they love it because they're attending meetups. Their boss doesn't make them get certifications, but they get them anyway. They're actively participating in open source repositories. There's a number of ways to tell whether or not somebody cares or loves the business, but that's not the be all end all either, because there are some folks that work in like large enterprise that have all closed source. They're not allowed to contribute to open source or something like that. They can have the same passion and the same type of love too. um, they just have to express it differently. They attend meetups, or they go to all of the conference shows, or they speak. They like to go to meetups and do talks. um, yeah, it's everybody's, every human is different, every human is unique.
mm,
But you can tell, like, some people, you can when after you've had a conversation with them, you can tell
mm, mm.
that they're good, or that they're really into it. Or there was one guy who we were looking at, and he was a plumber by trade. His plumbing business
Wow.
had gone under, and so he switched to tech. And what he did was he created a website that scraped the entire internet for all Grateful Dead he loved Grateful Dead. So he built for himself a website that scraped all of the Grateful Dead content from the entire universe of Grateful Dead information, and turned it into a website where you could pick the city, the state, the date, and listen to like live shows of bootlegs of stuff that they had done from like literally like terabytes of information. And he did that. The ex plumber did that because he loved Dead, um, Grateful Dead. And I was like, this guy can figure that out. Well,
Mm,
hell, he could do anything. Anything I put in front of that guy, he was able to crush. I could. I mean, but if you looked at his resume, he was a plumber.
wow, wow. That's super cool. Like, it's so cool to see these passionate people who go well beyond what's expected and they just figure it out. That's so cool.
Yeah, he's now one of the best Terraform deployment guys on the planet. He's
Mm.
absolutely amazing.
Wow, wow. That's very inspiring, very inspiring. And that you mentioned the meetups where some of these people also hang out.
Mm.
Are there some other conferences? Obviously, there is this AWS reInvent, but are there some other conferences where people who are really good and passionate about AWS or cloud engineering in general usually hang out?
Yes. So I mean, there's so many conferences out there. I became a developer advocate a year ago. So prior to that, I was an enterprise architect, working for large companies. But when I became a DA, my job is now to basically go to conferences and talk about HashiCorp and cloud stuff and the things that I find fun in anyway. Um, there's so many. There's KubeCon. There's the Microsoft conferences. There's the Google conferences. There's the local the summits. So like AWS has these local summits that they host. There's a if you Google AWS Summits 2024, you'll see a list of all of the local things that they're
Mm,
throwing to for folks to gather together, and they do the same things that they do at reInvent. They have keynotes, they have breakouts, excuse me, they have expo halls, all
mm,
of the things. Did I say KubeCon? What else?
mhm.
There's so many out there.
Yeah.
If a recruiter Googled, tech conferences in my area or tech conferences globally, they're gonna come up with so many things. Some of them are kind of poopy,
Mm.
but a lot of them are good.
Awesome. Well, it's just about finding the time and energy to go out there and maybe step out of the comfort zone because a lot of recruiters may be feeling a bit insecure or lack confidence to go out there and speak with people out there. So, what would be your recommendation to someone who is kind of getting into tech recruiting and wonders whether to go for a conference or a meetup? And if yes, then what to do? Is it awkward to just come and say, "Hey, I'm here looking for people"? What would you suggest to such a recruiter?
So I was just in San Francisco for Game Dev Conf 2024. One of my folks was giving a talk there on infrastructure as code for deploying to game houses, and because of where we're at in 2024, there's been a lot of tech layoffs. There's been a lot of folks that are looking for jobs. Most of the attendees for Game Dev Conf were either people that had their own indie game that they were trying to find funding for, or they were laid off game developers looking for positions. It was if you're looking for folks as a recruiter, that is a target rich environment. It was crazy how many folks I just had organic conversations with in the hallways, just folks just looking for jobs. So if a recruiter came in there and said, "Hey, I've got jobs," they would have been mobbed with
Mm.
resumes immediately.
Oh wow, it's good that you say this. This is so cool.
Hmm.
Awesome, awesome. And do you have any other recommendation or suggestion for recruiters out there who are getting into recruiting and some of them may consider which aspect or which part of IT to focus on, whether cloud or web development or AI or cybersecurity? Like, is there any part of the IT world that, given the layoffs, you would still consider as trending and booming and kind of still hiring IT professionals?
So cybersecurity is never going to not be a hiring area,
Mm,
regardless of what's the popular thing of the day. So right now, Gen AI obviously is very, very popular. So if I were a recruiter today, I would concentrate on generative AI. I mean, well, AI in general, not just generative AI, but all of the different flavors of AI. And I would also concentrate on cybersecurity.
mm,
I mean, those two things well, cybersecurity will never go away. Generative AI in general is the hot new thing right now that everybody's paying large sums of money to recruit people for.
mm,
Um, but I mean, there's also I don't differentiate between a lot of the different technologies. So when I say DevOps, I mean containerization. I mean solutions architecture for companies. There's a bunch of different things that cross pollinate with each other.
mhm,
So it's kind of I don't know. I don't separate them in my head. I don't think of like, okay, if I was a recruiter, I'd only be like a Gen AI recruiter. I'd only be a
Mhm,
cybersecurity recruiter. I would try to like, stay up to speed on the things that excited me. I mean,
mhm,
I would find something that I understand or that I want to get good at so that I can learn how to speak the language.
mhm,
One of the things that I try to impart to recruiters is to make sure that you understand the dictionary of words that the people you're trying to talk to speak with. Because when you're talking to somebody about a thing and you say, oh well, Java and JavaScript are the same thing, right?
mhm,
You let that person know that you have no idea what you're talking about, so how can they trust you to get them their next job?
mhm. That's very true, very true. And probably the last question before we wrap it up, just to build up on what you just mentioned with regards to AI and generative AI.
Mhm,
Like, can you just clarify for fellow recruiters out there, like, what exactly do you mean when you say AI? Because there are people who work in those big companies like Facebook and Amazon and Google, and they research AI. They are the people who come up with these models and LLMs and whatnot. And then there
mhm,
are other people who just implement what those researchers created. They
mhm.
implement through APIs. So when you say I would focus on AI hiring or recruiting, like, do you mean the researchers, or do you mean the web developers who would be implementing APIs created by those experts in those four companies?
I mean, it could be both. I would go back to the statement of the thing that excites you, or the thing that you understand. There's a really good Microsoft has a really good learning platform, learning.ai. I forget what it is. I'll send you the link so you can put it in the show notes for people that are
Mhm,
watching this. But it's a really good primer for the layperson to understand the difference between AI, generative AI, how large language models feed Gen AI, and all of the different. There's a bunch of different types of AI. You can't just
mhm,
say that.
yeah,
So it's if you go through this little, it's like a 2 hour course. It's super easy.
mhm,
It explains all the different things, and then after you've done that, pick the thing that you find exciting,
mm,
and then go for that angle of it. I think that a lot of recruiters get a bad rap. They're when I talk to folks that are in the business, they're like, "Oh, I just get so many calls from recruiters. I hate them." I'm like, "They're just trying to find you a job, buddy. They have a job, and their job is to like, try to fill these slots and cut them some slack." I think that as a recruiter, understanding a little bit about the field and not doing I mean, doing much more targeted selection of folks is is um is kind of important. And I have so much empathy for recruiters. I know that they have a tough time with trying to find, I mean, because there's companies out there that are very obstinate, and they say, oh, this person's got to have, you know 10 years of AI, of generative AI experience. I'm like, it's been out for a year and a half. What are you doing? Um, and then they have to turn around and like show that to a, uh, a potential prospect. And they're like, what do you, how do you not know this? Why are you showing me this? And they're like, I know this. It's anyway.
mm.
So
So
I have infinite empathy for recruiters. I know that they have a tough road to hoe. Uh, row to hoe? I forget how that goes. Um, So I think that by learning a little bit about the field that they want to swim
mm,
in and talk in is very important, so that as they're talking to both the company and to the prospect, everybody's speaking with the same language. You have to understand when somebody says a word, what that word means to them, not what it means to you.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. And we will also check out the learn.ai, as you mentioned, or similar.
I'll send you the
So
link for it. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
awesome, awesome. Thanks a lot. And on this note, where can people connect with you if they wanted to reach out to you and connect with you? Would LinkedIn work best, or do you have some other website?
LinkedIn works best. My online handle is Mistwire, Mistwire. If you put that into Google, I'm like the first 7 pages of Google hits.
Oh
It's
wow,
that's me. I mean, if
nice,
you could, I'm very easy. That's my URL. That's my Twitter handle. It's my Threads handle. It's my blogging website. Google Mistwire, and that's me.
nice. That's a good one. Okay, so I'll include it in the show notes, also on YouTube in the comments description. So thanks a lot. Thanks for all your insights. It's been very encouraging also, and thanks for sharing the empathy for recruitment.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
pleasure.
thanks a
Cool.
lot.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.